Hello everybody, this is Dan Miller for Bluegrass Unlimited magazine, and today I'm going to talk about the bass a little bit. Looking at all the videos we've done over the last almost 2 years, we've got lots of guitar and mandolin and fiddle and banjo, but we only have 4 up there for the bass. Ann Luna did 3, I believe, and she did a great job. And then Nate Sabat from Mile 12 did a great video for us. They both did a really good job, but I hate to task those folks to do too many because I know they're all busy. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about the bass with you. I've played bass for about 20 years, most of the time with Brad Davis and Tim May. I started out playing bass with Brad Davis in about 2002, and we just played as a duo for several years, and then Tim May joined us in about 2005, and we went out as a trio for the sort of house concert, coffee house kind of shows. And then when we played festivals, John Moore would join in with us, and also Tim's wife Gretchen would play fiddle with us. So we did that for a number of years. We cut an album, and on all that stuff with those guys I played bass because, to tell you the truth, I could play 2 notes for every 8 of theirs, and so that worked out good for me. Anyway, along the way I learned a lot about bass and timing and those kind of things from Brad. Brad Davis is a phenomenal musician. Most of you may know he played with Marty Stewart for 11 years. Before that he was with the Sweethearts of the Rodeo and the Forrester Sisters. After that he was with Sam Bush. He played in Earl Scruggs' band for a number of years. He played in John Jorgensen's Gypsy Jazz Band. He played in Billy Bob Thornton's rock band. And I've talked to a number of the folks that Brad has played with over the years, and really, although Brad is a phenomenal lead guitar player, most of them that I talked to told me that really they loved Brad for his rhythm playing, and he's a phenomenal rhythm player because his timing is so great. And so playing on stage with Brad and playing bass with Brad's timing and then getting Brad's feedback after a show or something, I learned a little bit. Now, Brad likes a very simple bass line, very simple bass. He doesn't like a busy bass player. So I never learned how to be a busy bass player playing with Brad. I played pretty straightforward, simple stuff. However, the timing always had to be there. And as a bass player, as you know, timing is really your first job. And before I do anything on the bass, I just want to talk a little bit about timing, because again, that's your first job as a bass player. Is you want to set that time for the band, and you want to be rock solid with that time. And it's always something that you'll always work on. Even everybody I've interviewed for Flat Picking Guitar Magazine or Bluegrass Unlimited, when I've talked about timing, these guys that have played for decades are still working on timing, getting the metronome out, still honing that craft of good time. And so it's something that you always work on, and mine is certainly not perfect, but I'm going to try to give you a few tips that have helped me, and these are things that Brad passed along to me when we'd be playing shows together. So again, the first thing is timing. After timing, the next job is to help lead the listener's ear to the next chord change, and that would be through your bass runs. And both Nate and Ann Luna did a good job, explaining some basic bass runs. I'm not going to get into that. And then the next job would be to add some interest, and I might show you a real simple little thing that could add a little bit interest if where you're at right now is just playing your 1/5, your root 5th back and forth. I'll show you something that might add a little bit of interest to that before you start walking your arpeggios and things like that. Well, Ann showed a little bit of that in one of her videos. So I won't step on what Nate or Ann have shown, but I want to maybe show you a couple things on the bass. But mostly I want to talk about timing. And again, one of the things is this concept of playing ahead or behind the beat, like the lead instrumentalist or even the singer, pushing ahead of the beat or laying back behind the beat. And when that's happening in the band, as the bass player, you got to be dead on the beat because that's the reference. when I interviewed Tony Rice, and you can hear it on the Tony Rice podcast, he talked about, I asked him about timing, and there was this analogy that I think I heard from Todd Phillips, and I think Todd got it from Elvin Jones, the great jazz drummer, is that when you think about the beat, you can think about the beat being cars on a train. And then where you play in relation to that beat could be like hobos that are sitting on the train. The hobo could be in the middle of the train, up in the front of in the train car, up in front of the car, in the back of the car. So the beat is that car, that box car, and where you lay that beat is going to be that hobo going back and forth. But as the bass player, you need to be right on that beat because that's the reference that everybody's using. If those guys are pushing and pulling the beat a little bit, they push and pull in reference to where you are setting that beat. That's my understanding of it. And I'm going to play you a little thing of Brad Davis and Brian Sutton playing Wheelhouse. It's on a CD that we did years ago called Flat Picking Favorites, Hot and Spicy, where we had two guitar players play in duo on just festival favorite kind of flat picking tunes. And Brad and Brian do a great job with this. And I'm just going to play you for a minute Brad's first solo and let you listen to the way he's playing around with the timing and where he's laying his notes in relation to the beat. And then after you hear that, then we'll come back and talk about it for a minute. Okay, I got my phone here on a little speaker that hopefully the camera mic will pick up. So here we go. I'm just going to play a bit of Brad's first solo here. Okay, so you hear that, and you can hear how he really pushes and pulls on either side of the beat. He starts out kind of right on it, and then he gets this part where he kind of pulls the reins way back for a few measures, and then when he comes back, he comes way out top with a lot of energy, okay? So when a guy is playing something like that, as a bass player, you've got to be just steady and not sort of go with the temptation of going with him. You've got to apply that right steady time. You know, I talked about the hobo on the train analogy for what it means to go ahead or behind the beat. An image I like to think about is three guys on motorcycles, right? So the first guy is a standard motorcycle and he's sitting straight up. The next guy is on like a Ducati and he's way leaned forward like this. And the third guy is on a chopper and he's leaning way back. And so they're all driving down the highway going the same 60 miles an hour or whatever it is. But the Ducati guy appears to be going faster because he's out ahead, where the guy sitting in upright is right in the middle, and the guy on the chopper appears to be maybe going a little slower. I think that's another analogy you could use, so to speak. And you need to be that middle guy if you're playing bass. You got to allow that Ducati guy to lean forward and the chopper guy to lean back, but you're staying straight up and you're all moving along at the same rate of speed. But it appears that some are the one's going faster and the other is going a little slower. But in reality, everybody's moving along with that boxcar at the same speed, or moving along with those motorcycles where the speedometer says the same thing. So that's something that you could also maybe think about as an image or an analogy. So when I first started playing with Brad, he would do stuff like that, and I would tend to want to go with him. You know, the energy's up, he's really pushing it, and he would tell me, man, you got to stay solid. You got to stay right in the pocket. And in order to do that, he recommended that I just, when that moment happens, that I just take a breath and keep it solid. You know, keep that timing as steady and solid as I can. Another thing where you might tend to rush is when you're doing a bass run. You know, the bass player's job, again, number one is time. Number two is leading the listener's ear to the next chord change, and you do that by your bass runs. And number three is to add some interest to what you're doing, like I said before. When you're doing those runs, sometimes beginning bass players tend to rush the run because they'd be going along, boom, 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 boom. And that's, you know, kind of the easiest thing to do when you're keeping your time. But when you add a bass run to go to the next chord, a lot of times if you don't just breathe and lay back and keep it right in the pocket, you'll tend to rush those things. So just something to be aware of. And again, the advice Brad gave me was just relax and breathe. You know, think about your breath and then stay right on it. And a lot of times, another thing I would do is Brad likes to tap his foot when he's playing. And when I got to those places where I felt like, you know, I might get off, I would just watch his foot and use that as a visual signal to play right when his foot tap happened. And that was helpful. Moving your foot and tapping your foot is helpful as well. Although if you've listened to some of my podcasts, Bill Monroe frowned on his people tapping their foot. But I think it's a good thing to do. Bill's reason was he wanted all the energy into the instrument, not some of it into the foot, from what I've been told. But anyway, Missy Raines, I took a workshop from her, and if you watch her move, she's moving different parts of her body. She's tapping her foot, she might be moving her hips, she might be doing different things with her arms. And all that is to, you can do that to subdivide the beat, especially on a slower tune. You've got the notes farther apart, and so there's more room for variable, more room for not getting it right exactly where you want it. So instead of just going tap the foot on the beat, maybe in between the beat, you're popping your elbow out, or you're doing something with your hip or something, so you're going boom, 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 you know, move different parts of your body in different segments of subdividing the beat, and a lot of times that will also help you lay that beat right where it needs to be, where that note that you're hitting on the bass, lay it where you need to be. So I would say the more complicated your playing gets, whether you're running arpeggios or up and down straight linear lines to add the bass runs in, watch, the busier you get, the easier it is to maybe rush a little bit. So keep that in mind, okay? Another guy that loved to play with time famously was Clarence White, and I think in an interview one time somebody was asking him about his style, and he said he liked to play with time. That was a famous Clarence White quote. And Joe Carr was in Country Gazette when he was, after Clarence had passed away, and they did a Kentucky Colonels reunion with Joe playing guitar. So Joe got to play the guitar with Roland White on mandolin and Roger Bush on bass and Billy Ray Latham on banjo. And what he said, he wrote an article about this experience for Flat Picking Guitar Magazine. And what he said was, when he played with those guys, he realized how Clarence could play with the time. What allowed him to do that is that every other person in the band was so solid, right on the beat, that Clarence could push and pull, and he wasn't going to push and pull those guys with him. They would stay solid. Roger Bush on the bass would stay right on that beat, and then Clarence could play with it back and forth, like Brad did on that little example there, and not throw the rest of the band off, because they knew how to stay right there, right on the beat when Clarence would do stuff like that. So as a bass player, that's what you want to learn how to do, and you know, practicing with a metronome and all that kind of stuff is helpful. But again, playing with real live people is the best way to do it, and just really pay attention to what's going on, and don't get pushed or pulled by what the other people in the band are doing, because it's your job to lay that solid time in there. Okay, so that's enough about that timing. Just hopefully some of those things are things that you can think about and may help you in your bass playing. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to talk about today, actually getting the hands on the bass, is how to vary. If you're just playing a root fifth, if you're a beginning bass player and you're used to doing the root fifth thing, maybe you're doing a G-C-D progression, so you'd be got right, and so that's where you start. That's what you learn how to play at the beginning. And again, if you watch Anne's videos, I think she did 3 of them for us, and Nate's video, they teach you how to go forward from there, and they give you some tips about how to start walking arpeggios or walking a pentatonic scale. They give you some hints about how to lay in bass runs. I think Anne does like a Your Love Is Like a Flower progression and shows you how to move with some runs between the changes. I'm going to be a little bit simpler than that. If you're just used to playing the 1-5 and you want to add a little bit more interest than just that repetitive sound, the first step would be to learn your different 1-5 positions. There's a bunch you could do, but let's say you're in G on the G chord. Obviously you could go G here on the E string and then an open D. That could be your 1-5, or you could do your open G string and your D string. That's 2 options that you have for a 1 root fifth thing in G. For C, it's similar. You could do this one, starting on your C note here on the A string, and then play your open G, your root fifth, or you could go here, which is this position on the A string, and the same position on the E string for a C chord. And then for D, you could do again your open position, which is D, A, right? Or you could do your open D string and play your A note there, okay? And so what's fun sometimes is just to alternate between those, especially if you're staying on a chord for a long time. But let's say we just played, we're going to play what I just played there, which is like a measure, 2 measures of G, 2 of C, 2 of D, back to 2 of G, which is like Blue Ridge Cabin Home and many, many others kind of progression. So instead of going boom, I could start with this G and then go that, and then when I go to C I could go and then D and then back to G, like that. You know, so a little bit faster, it would be something like something like that. You can mix and match and mix that around, but if you get really accustomed to your different positions, and of course, you know, you've got this reach here for a C, you could go up to there. There's a bunch of different ones that you could figure out, but just figure out 2 root fifth movements for your chords, and then figure out and play around with how to change between them. And basically what you create is a little bit more interest, a little bit more movement, but you're still staying with just a root fifth thing. You're not adding runs yet, you're not adding arpeggio walks yet. Just something simple to make it a little bit more interesting than just a repetitive root fifth. You're still staying root fifth, but you're making it more interesting because you're moving between different octaves. And play around with that, and sometimes you can make it interesting by following the contour of where the vocalist is going, and kind of go, if the vocalist is going up, go up. You know, if the vocalist is going down, sometimes you can kind of follow along and make it fit what's going on or what you hear going on, and that sometimes works out really well. So play around with that on the bass. It's not very complicated. You just got to learn more than one position for every chord, more than one root fifth pattern. And once you learn those patterns, then you can apply them to any key. You know, in A, you're going to be here. You know, you can just find them, learn at least two, and then mess around with, as you're moving through your changes, mess around with moving from one position to the next root fifth, so that it adds a little bit more interest, a little bit more motion without getting too complicated. Okay? And so that's all I got for you today. I hope you learned something about the bass, and we'll see you next time. This is Dan Miller for Bluegrass Unlimited Magazine.